Good day and a very warm welcome to all of you who are tuning in to our panel discussion today on the future of electric mobility that we are hosting, I think SGInnovate are hosting with the Embassy of Sweden in Singapore. My name is Dre and I'm the Chief Executive of SGInnovate. It is my honor to be opening today's event alongside His Excellency Nicholas Warnström, who is the Ambassador of Sweden to Singapore. I joined SGInnovate in May last year, and one of the very first events I did was with you, Ambassador. So I'm really happy to have this opportunity to be doing this again with you. For those of you who are not familiar with us, SGInnovate is a government-owned, early-stage, deep tech venture capital firm that also serves as a deep tech ecosystem developer. Our raison d'etre is to make concrete the potential of deep science and deep technologies for social and economic impact. And we do this by bringing people together, by fostering collaborations, by raising awareness, by developing talent, and ultimately by investing in deep tech startups. We work closely with our partners, like the Swedish Embassy, to organize events like this, because we see such conversations as important precursors to eventual action. Today, I'm thrilled that we will explore another widely discussed theme, electric mobility. It is axiomatic that climate change is one of the most pressing challenges confronting humanity. According to the International Energy Agency, road vehicles, which includes cars, trucks, buses, two-wheelers, three-wheelers, accounted for 75% of global transport carbon emissions in 2020. In this fight against global climate change, it is vital for all of us, governments, companies, individuals, researchers, investors, to work together to make the transport sector greener and more sustainable. Sweden, together with her Scandinavian neighbors especially, and Europe generally, have been leaders in responding to this threat with concrete concerted action. Singapore is also building up its own head of steam. Climate change was brought to the forefront of national consciousness by our Prime Minister, Mr. Lee Hsien Loong, in a seminal speech at the National Day rally in 2019. Environmental consciousness was further helped along by the pandemic, one of whose silver linings was the positive, palpable effect of reduced transport, reduced travel on the environment. So earlier this year, the Singapore Green Plan 2030 was launched, and just last week, sweeping measures to actualize that plan were announced. One of the cornerstones of the Singapore Green Plan 2030 is cleaner transportation. Concrete measures, which will be implemented from this year, will see Singapore progressively phase out internal combustion engine vehicles, revising its road tax structure to incentivize adoption of mass market electric vehicles, and building 60,000 more electric vehicle charging points across the country. Sweden, of course, already has a very strong head start towards harnessing clean energy and electric vehicles to tackle climate change. The electrification of Sweden's transport sector, I understand, is not limited to vehicles, but also includes the electrification of roads. It also has one of the world's highest adoption rates for plug-in electric vehicles. So there is much for Singapore to learn from Sweden. So I look forward to hearing from the panelists in a while, as they will discuss the future of electric mobility, how Singapore and Sweden can collaborate, and how we can collaborate to make, with overseas markets, to realize the electrification of the global transport sector. On behalf of SGInnovate, I would like to thank Andrew Chan of Grab, Nirupa Chanda of Hitachi ABB Power Grids, Frederica Claren of Polestar, Jan Pedersen of the Swedish Transport Administration, for taking time off to share your deep insights with us today. Needless to say, I thank Katarina Brud of Mobility X Labs for moderating this session. And finally, last but not least, as always, deep appreciation to the Swedish Embassy for co-organizing this event with us. Long may our relationship last. And on this note, please allow me to invite Ambassador Nicholas to say a few words. Ambassador Nicholas, please.
Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me? Good. First of all, thank you, Jay. That's a great introduction. I want to say, first of all, how incredibly exciting it is to always cooperate with SGInnovate. And over the years here, we've done so many exciting events. What we can do together, I think the best thing we do is when we sort of have a meeting of the minds, exactly like the one we have today. So I shan't keep everyone too long from that, but I just wanted to say couple of things. Of course, this event is a very good one for me as Swedish ambassador to be a part of, because it pertains both to two things that are very close to our hearts. One is technology and innovation, and the other one, of course, is sustainability. I think it's obvious by now that electric is definitely the future, at least for the foreseeable future, is the future of transport. And of course, the sustainability degree depends on a lot of things, including where the ultimate energy comes from, and then the efficiency of the systems and so on. But that's where everything is heading, and I think Sweden is a particularly good partner in this, because we are a little unique. There are not that many countries that can say legitimately that they produce so many, or participate or produce in so many parts of the creative process, the design, the supply chain, the manufacturing of the future of electric mobility. We, of course, we have manufacturers of, I think, at least 3 electric truck manufacturers, electric car manufacturers. We have the electrification solutions. ABB Hitachi is here on this call to do it. We even have battery manufacturing and energy storage part of that ecosystem as well. And very, very importantly, and I think this is something we come back to all the time when we do stuff together with Singapore and with SGInnovate, is the approach to this in a society. Because when you do a transformation as radical as the electric mobility is, it's of course the companies, the corporations, the manufacturers, but it's also the entire science, research, academic ecosystem, and then the support of governments like mine and like Singapore's to make it work. And that sort of creation, the co-creation of all these actors, is what makes it particularly exciting. And to that point, I'm glad that this particular panel really shows that. Katarina Bruder is going to be our moderator, but of course, Mobility X Lab itself is an example of this. With the range from Ericsson to Volvo Cars, but also some of the foreign, for example, Chinese cooperation partners being involved. And then, of course, Polestar. My dad is one of those guys he owns a Tesla, and having read a review of Polestar 2 the other day, I said to him, look, you have to upgrade now. So I hope he does that. I think it's very exciting. Exciting again to have ABB, a constant partner for us on the call. And of course, Grab, which is an everyday feature, truly innovative company, a unicorn out here, and definitely one of those partners where the software side and the efficiency side of electric mobility is going to be a big part. And last but not least, to say that transport in general is one of the areas of cooperation that I feel most excited about between Sweden and Singapore, because we provide all these solutions that I've described in the ecosystem, but ultimately as governments, we're doing this also for our citizens. And that's why we have this MOU that has been signed by the Transport Authority in Sweden, who are of course on this call as well, and the LTA here in Singapore. So I'm very excited about that. Looking forward to hearing everyone on this super interesting area of cooperation between our two countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to Dri and Ambassador Nicholas for your welcome remarks. I'll now like to pass the time over to our moderator for today, Katarina Brook, the Director of Mobility X Labs. Katarina, please.
Thank you so much, Jody. So to start off, I want to give a short introduction about Singapore and Sweden and the future of electric mobility. So despite being more than 10,000 kilometers apart, the small city-state of Singapore and the Scandinavian nation of Sweden share many similarities in their push towards becoming smart cities. From a strong focus on innovation in healthcare to the use of autonomous vehicles, both countries are leveraging technology to solve problems and improve the lives of citizens. The first practical electric cars were produced in the 1880s, But until the early 20th century, electric motors were the preferred method of propulsion, and electric vehicles were in daily use as taxi cabs and delivery vehicles. But that all changed when the internal combustion engine was developed and the dreams of electric power transport and logistics were put on the back burner. But as electrical motors, and more importantly, batteries, reached a level of sophistication, performance continued to improve, and the capability to meet customer needs, now the electric powertrains seem to return to their position at center stage. Both Singapore and Sweden are using technologies to overcome various challenges, such as healthcare and urban mobility. Collaboration, diversity, and welcoming of new technology seems to be the key for both nations fostering a culture of innovation. And as we all share the emerging threats, climate change, cooperation across nations is more important than ever. My name is Katarina Brud. I head Mobility X-Lab. It's an innovation collaboration hub that accelerates global innovation based on Swedish collaboration culture for future mobility solutions and innovations for a better tomorrow. I'm very proud to present the panel that we have today for the session from both Singapore and Sweden representatives. And by starting off, I want them to get them to introduce. I will ask them the same question, what they do, and is the future electric and why? And to start off, I want to ask Fredrika Klarén, Head of Sustainability at Polestar. So what does Polestar do? And is the future electric and why? So please, Fredrika.
Hi, Katarina. Thanks for having me. We at Polestar, we're a young Swedish EV brand based in Sweden, owned by Geely and Volvo. We make electric vehicles like the one you can see behind me. And we are all about accelerating the transition into sustainable mobility. And we know that EVs have a key role to play in that transition, but we also know that we have a lot to do to make it truly sustainable. And we believe that electric mobility is the way forward because it is the route to climate neutral mobility.
Thank you so much, Fredrika, and welcome to the panel. So then I want to direct the word to Andrew Chan, Managing Director of Transport for Grab in Singapore. So what does Grab do, and is the future electric, and why?
Hi, everyone. My name is Andrew Chan. I'm the Managing Director of our passenger transport services here in Singapore. Grab covers a variety of things now. We started off as a ride-hailing platform, but we've since branched into deliveries as well as into financial services. Specific to transport, we believe that a sustainable mode of transportation is what is best for the community and the countries in which we operate. So we are very excited to see developments in the hybrid and EV space. And we are particularly excited with Singapore's recent announcement around the SG Green Plan 2030. And we look forward to working with the government and various other industry partners to bring that to reality as quickly as possible.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Happy to have you here. So let's move over to Sweden, from Singapore to Sweden, and Jan Pettersson, Program Director for the Swedish Transport Administration. So what do you do, and is the future electric?
Hi everyone, my name is Jan Pettersson, and I'm working as the Program Director for the Electrification program within Sweden for the national roads in Sweden. And the Swedish Transport Administration is a part of the Swedish state, and we are responsible for all roads and railways that are owned by the state in Sweden. And yes, absolutely, we think the way forward is to electrify the transport system. We think it's the most energy efficient way to solve this issue, how to free the transport system from fossil fuels. So absolutely a big yes.
Thank you so much, Jan, and welcome to the panel as well. So now turning over to Singapore again, Nirupa Chander, Managing Director in Singapore for Hitachi ABB Power Grids.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, thank you, Katarina. I'm Nirupa Chander. I'm the Managing Director for Hitachi ABB Power Grids in Singapore. We're a newly formed organization bringing together Hitachi and ABB Power Grids with a combined heritage of over 250 years. We're an organization that's been providing, pioneering technologies and digital solutions for a sustainable energy future. and enabling a stronger, smarter, and greener grid. For us, it's a very exciting time to see that the energy and the mobility worlds are merging. And on the back of our strong Swedish heritage from the ABB side and our long-term presence in Singapore, with having deployed our technology in the grid infrastructure that helps run Singapore today since the late 1960s, we're definitely very confident that the future, the carbon neutral future, is electric. So really looking forward to the discussion today. So thanks again for having us.
Thank you and welcome, Nirupa. We have a great set of panelists here today, and we'll get deeper into the discussion about the future of electromobility, collaboration, and innovation. Before we do, I want to say for the audience, you can type questions in the chat. There's a Q&A box, so please do. And if you have a specific question directed to a specific panelist, please write that, and I'll try to moderate that as we go during the event as well. So to start off then, what are the key impacts that electromobility will have on society, and how will electromobility affect people's everyday lives? And Nirupa, I want to ask you if you can elaborate on that.
Yeah, thanks, Katrina. So like I said, I mean, we're living through a very interesting time. I mean, the transitions that we will see over the next 30 years are going to be nothing like we've seen before, especially with the, the merging of the energy and the mobility industry. And it's great to see that finally, sustainability has become at the top of the agenda for governments all around the world. And governments here, like in Singapore and Sweden, have been taking really a front and center stance on this. And at the same time, technology has become more accessible, more affordable, and that will enable with, more deployments. And we're no longer talking about, a pilot here and a pilot there, but really now the challenge ahead of us is about large scale deployment. And us as, citizens and users of this technology as well, we will see this affect our lives as well, and, support the transition to, lower carbon footprint for us as citizens and users of energy and, transport solutions.
Thank you so much. And I want to direct the same question to you, Jan, as well. So just to repeat, what will the key impacts of electromobility have on society, and how will it affect everyone's everyday lives?
I think right now we see a very rapid development regarding different kind of electrification systems, whether we talk about static charging, dynamic charging, or hydrogens to feed fuel cells and so on. So I think with this rapid development, we will quite soon see a large-scale deployment of an infrastructure for making it possible to charge all these kind of electric systems. So I think the effect will be very rapid and very large, and I think this will be a very possible development. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Jan. And I want to direct myself to you, Fredrika, now, looking at the adoption of electrical vehicles, and you work at Polestar. So can you give us some kind of highlight, and perhaps on Sweden specifically, how fast is this adoption going to electric vehicles?
Speeding up, truly. The latest figure that I saw was that 1 in 5 new cars in Sweden is purely electric, and even more are plug-ins. So it's an amazing development. That is, I mean, the opportunities we have on the Swedish market with consumers that are aware of the sustainability issues, they are open to new technology. They are really keen on becoming more sustainable in their lifestyle. So I think that is the impact that we are seeing now that those traits have. So, but I mean, I want to talk about the global situation, because even though we see this amazing trend in Sweden, only, I think it was in 2019, 1% of the global car stock was EVs. And we know the challenge we have when it comes to reaching climate neutrality on a global scale, that not only do we need to get down to net zero emissions by 2050, but we need to see a rapid decrease in greenhouse emissions during this decade. And then the speed, the transition that we're seeing now is not good enough. So we really need to take all of the learnings from countries like Sweden and use them to really speed up the transition on a global scale, I think.
Thank you so much for that perspective. And now I want to turn to you, Andrew, just if you can share the perspective of the adoption of electrical vehicles in Singapore and your take on that.
Sure. I mean, in Singapore, we are just taking our first steps. Again, with the recent announcement a few weeks back on the Singapore Green Plan 2030, the government's taking some significant steps towards shifting our economy to an electrified economy, and that's fantastic news for us. What that then means, though, is that everyone now needs to get into lockstep with this. As the ambassador I mentioned earlier, as well as some of the other panelists, it's not a single player that can accomplish this. It has to be a team effort across education, infrastructure, government, private companies, and private citizens as well. So we're really looking forward to seeing that come together, with OEMs such as Polestar, or with some of our partners and investors such as Hyundai and Toyota, seeing a lot of that move together in step, and hopefully we'll see that accelerate significantly in the coming years here in Singapore.
Thank you. And we do see electric buses and trams, electric ferries, scooters in cities around the world today. But I want to also ask you, Andrew, what do you think is the critical factor to support a faster move to personal electromobility across society?
I think it's really going to come down to just convenience. I think we're still at that early stage right now where if I have a viable alternative, why wouldn't I take it? It's one of those things where the problem is not in your face. Therefore, it becomes a lot harder to make that decision on the trade-off. We've seen that here in Singapore. Grab has been running a fairly large fleet of electric vehicles as part of our service. We have 200 Kona EVs plying the roads, and it's not that easy to get the car. It's not that easy to get it charged. It's not that easy to deal with all of that infrastructure. And so it just becomes harder for the customer to be able to pick it. We are seeing definitely, we have as part of our mass transit system, we definitely have more of those electric buses coming online, and that's great to see. And also the government has put in a target to reduce that reliance on internal combustion engine buses and trams. So that's really good for us to see. And now it's around cars and trucks and the likes of that now.
Thank you, Andrew. So on that note, I want to direct myself to Nirupa and Jan. And what are some of the infrastructure challenges that need to be addressed for mass adoption of electric vehicles? And if we start with you, Nirupa.
Yeah, thanks, Katrina. And just leading from what Andrew was alluding to is, availability of charging infrastructure is a key inhibitor to EV adoption, and that will drive consumer behavior. And just to give you a bit of scale of the problem, if there's 100 million cars, that's the anticipation by 2030, electric cars on the road, that would be a 30-fold increase from where we are today. And in terms of electricity demand, that's 500 terawatt hours of electricity consumption. And to give you some perspective, that's the total annual consumption of electricity in France today. And at those same levels, that will be 10% of total electricity output by 2040. So that's a significant amount of consumption that will be electric and would require charging infrastructure to support that uptake. So governments, policymakers, regulators, and authorities need to start coming together to plan on the front foot for the deployment of these electric vehicles. Companies like Polestar, what we've heard from Frederica today, Tesla was mentioned previously by Nicholas. So clearly, the vehicles are available. But it's the charging infrastructure that has been lagging behind and is a key inhibitor for the adoption of electric vehicles. And I suppose, that's where our focus is. And we bring the knowledge from the grid side, having worked in this industry for a century already.
Thank you so much, Nirupa, for that perspective. And Jan, I want to direct myself to you then. What do you see as some of the infrastructure challenges that need to be addressed?
Well, in Sweden, of course, we have a very good situation regarding energy. We have lots of energy in Sweden, lots of green energy. So the biggest challenge for us, I would say, is absolutely the charging infrastructure. I mean, we have a very positive increase of number of electric passenger cars in Sweden. But from the Transport Administration in Sweden, we also focus on all types of vehicles. So we think the biggest challenge now is how to electrify the heavy-duty vehicles. So we are right now launching a number of real-life tests on public roads, both with dynamic charging of vehicles. By that we mean we deploy system for how to electrify the road systems. We are testing a number of techniques. And also we are going to launch now a number of big pilots with static fast charging system for heavy duty vehicles. So in Sweden, the biggest challenge now is to really keep up with the vehicle manufacturers that say, okay, we will solve the issue regarding vehicles. That is not a problem. Please deploy charging infrastructure. So I think that is the biggest challenge we have now in Sweden.
Thank you, Jan. And on talking about the challenges and also opportunities, but I want to direct myself to Fredrika. What do you see as the main challenge for us to accelerate the adoption?
Well, as previous speakers have said, the challenge is really to make it easy for the consumers to make this transition, that they see it as something that is that works in their daily everyday life. And then we need to talk about the charging infrastructure, of course. And we also need to be more clear about the possibilities, and we really need to help them envision how society can improve by this action that they can take. So for Polestar, we really want to bring them along for our journey in developing this these products in a more sustainable way, so that they also know that they contribute in a positive way to the grander scheme of things by doing this conscious decision while purchasing a car.
Yes, thank you so much for that. And we talk about collaboration, and we say businesses and government needs to remain relevant, both for the private and public sector, and they need to partner to achieve further success. And I'm thinking, Jan, do you have an example where this has been made, where you work in collaboration, private, public sector, businesses, governments, and so on?
Well, absolutely. I have a number of examples, and it's much about heavy-duty vehicles. As I said, a big challenge in Sweden is how to electrify the heavy-duty vehicles. So we have launched a program in Sweden where we gather all the stakeholders to make it possible. We are talking about grid owners, vehicle manufacturers, users, the state, etc., and so on. And really try everyone to get into this issue and discuss and how this. And big issue is how to set the business models for this. So the business model issues is also very, very important. And here I think the government has a really big task, because in an upstart phase, you always need to set some sort of incentive to make it happen. So in Sweden now we have a very big and good discussion regarding this, I must say.
I want to turn over to our Singapore panelists, Nirupa and Andrew. Do you have any example where public and private sector collaborates in the same manner, business and governments?
Yeah, I mean, there are several examples in countries around the world now where public and private partnerships are coming together, including, academia as well, for supporting the technological innovation as well. And yeah, we are also believe strongly that this is the way to actually help with accelerate the deployment of these solutions in different countries. And Singapore, I mean, to be honest, they've always done this. Singapore's done that very well in terms of bringing both industry, academia, government, policymakers together to help with this transition. And this MOU now that we have between Sweden Transport Authority and LTA is another good example of that. So yeah, there are pilot examples that we have in other countries, including the UK, where we have deployed, new charging infrastructure solutions by bringing together different parties.
Great, thank you so much. Let me see if we can raise one of the questions from the Q&A chat here. And let's see who wants to answer from the panelists, and it's about batteries and hydrogen. So electrical vehicles have a big component, the battery, which is known to degrade over time. Recycling batteries saves 70% of the carbon footprint, but it doesn't quite solve the resource requirements. Hydrogen seems to solve these problems, even though the technology is still relatively young. Are there any thoughts from the panelists, and what are the pros and cons for implementing hydrogen versus batteries? So I don't know, Fredrika, do you have any perspective or take on this question?
I do. I think that in a sustainable society and in a sustainable mobility, there will not be a one-size-fits-all solution. I think we have to think about things in another way going forward, where we see that there can be a lot of solutions in place and that there is a more diversity in solutions. So for us, of course, we are developing the battery electric vehicle. We see that this is a technology that is here today. It works. It has a lower carbon footprint than that of an internal combustion engine. So we're focusing on that. But I think that hydrogen is really interesting if you work with heavy transports, for example. And we also need to direct the solutions to where it has the most impact. I think that is also really important.
Great, thank you. I saw Jan, I thought you want to add to this.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say in Sweden, we absolutely think that if we are going to reach the climate goals we have in Sweden, we are supposed to have 0 net emission with CO2 emissions by 2045. And to be able to solve that, we need to work with all different kinds of solutions, every tricks it needed. So we think we need to work with both electrification and also biofuels, and of course hydrogen ion fuel cells for heavy duty vehicles. That is very, very interesting. So we know that there are a number of big vehicle manufacturers now that are really into this. So we are trying to follow all these solutions. We don't think we have one silver bullet to solve this.
Great, thank you, Jan, on that perspective. I'm just reading some of the questions in the chat. Perhaps related, how does Sweden balance production of clean energy across public transportation infrastructures and road infrastructures, and across hydrogen, nuclear, and renewables? I don't know, John, if you can answer or give a reflection on that, how we balance the production of clean energy.
I mean, as I said, in Sweden, we have a very good situation. We have a lot of water power and also some nuclear, and the wind power is also really a huge deployment now in Sweden. So we have a good situation in Sweden, I must say. So, yeah.
Thank you. And it's often said that technology is developed for the sake of technology, not necessarily for the betterment of the humanity of the planet. So in the transition towards more electromobility, how can we ensure that the changes that are implemented are sustainable, and the incentives of actually caring about this? And I want to ask you, Fredrika, to this question. So how can we make sure that the technology we develop and implement are sustainable and that we care about it? And do you have any examples to share of how you work? Yeah.
Absolutely, and that is the conversation we need to have now, because it seems like everyone is simply putting out promises on electrifying their fleets and not saying much more, but we really need to talk about how do we do that in a sustainable way. And looking at Polestar 2 behind me, we have done a full life cycle assessment of that, and we will publish full life cycle assessments for all of our cars going forward. And in that, we see that already today, as I said earlier, it has a lower carbon footprint than that of a comparable model that has internal combustion engine. But of course, we see the big impact that the production has in terms of carbon footprint. And materials are really at the heart of the sustainability impacts that we see, regardless if we talk about environmental issues or human rights issues. So that is really where we need to focus going forward as a car manufacturer. We need to stop focusing so much on the tailpipe as we have done earlier and really direct our focus to the production phase of the car. And this is, of course, where we see that the battery production has a large impact due to the fact that you use a lot of minerals and metals, and also in the car, in the overall car, there's a lot of use of minerals and metals that are produced in a way where they are reliant on fossil fuels. So this is really what we need to solve. We need to find climate neutral materials. We need to work with efficiency in terms of energy. And we really need to help our supply chains to transition to renewable energy. But of course, we also need to talk about the use phase, and what we have already brought up here is really important. We need renewable energy in the charging infrastructure. We see that if you charge the Polestar 2 on the global electricity mix, it has a lower impact than that of a comparable fossil fuel car. But if you charge it with renewable energy, it has less than half the carbon footprint than that of the fossil fuel car. So the impact that you can have with renewable energy is amazing. So we really need to tap into that potential. And this is where we see a huge lack of transparency today. As consumers, you don't know the energy you're getting when you're charging in the infrastructure today. So simply taking the step to becoming more transparent as a charging operator, and then of course taking action to purchase renewable energy.
Great perspective, and I think it's great to hear about the strategy and the life cycle assessment and the renewable energies. Do you see that Polestar is unique in this sense, talking about this, or are more OEMs and others speaking in the same terms today?
I see that there's an amazing movement in the industry, of course, and I think that we are all utilizing life cycle assessments today to measure the impacts of our products. But the car industry has a transparency issue, and there are a lot of evidence around that, of course, Dieselgate being one. And I see a lack of transparency around the impact of the cars that you put on the market. We really need to. So we put out a call to action last autumn when we published our LCA for other car makers to do the same, to show their methodology so that consumers actually can trust the data that we provide to them, and also hopefully get to compare. I mean, our vision is really that you as a consumer can compare the different carbon footprints of the different models that you are choosing between, like you do more and more in the grocery store or when you're shopping for garments. So that is the vision that we have for our industry.
Thank you, Fredrika. And I want to turn to you, Andrew, to ask pretty much the same questions. So in the transition towards more electromobility, how can we ensure that the changes implemented are sustainable, and also who should set the requirements that the innovative technology is sustainable? So I would like to hear your perspective on that, Andrew.
Yeah, I think visibility is the key thing here. Again, we mentioned earlier about how it's a problem that's not in your face, and so how do you make it interesting or relevant to the average consumer? And so I think it's really important for for ride-hailing platforms like Grab, where we would be able to put effectively your carbon footprint somewhere visible. And also then to make carbon neutral or carbon light transport options available for you, so that you can then keep track of what you're doing and how you're doing it. So by frankly being able to track it, you're able to make it sustainable. And if it's kind of hidden, as what Fredrika was mentioning earlier, then it becomes a lot harder to figure out how, are you making a difference? How are you making a difference? Am I really making a difference? And going from there. In terms of your second question around who should be determining that, I think it's a combination of everyone in the ecosystem, right? We need to help educate as sort of end user businesses, as manufacturers, as supply chain, upstream supply chains, tier 1, tier 2 suppliers, as government, to help people understand what does saving 1 kilogram of carbon really mean, and how does that affect you living in Singapore versus you living in Sweden or anywhere else in the world. And that in turn allows the consumer to make that educated decision on where they should spend their money on sustainable initiatives, be it not riding, maybe taking a bicycle, maybe walking, taking the bus, or taking a private transport, and just understanding that so they can make those trade-offs.
Thank you, Andrew. And I want to also see, Nirupa, do you have things to add on this? How can we make technology sustainable and make people care and drive this forward?
No, I totally agree with what Fredrika and Andrew have already shared regarding visibility and transparency. But also, this raises the topic of the entire value chain also becoming sustainable. So right from the generation side to the consumption side. So on the generation side, we've seen a huge reduction in price levels for wind, solar, and hydro generation, which has enabled the deployment of more renewable generation than fossil fuel. But the reality is still that there's 1 billion people around the world without access to electricity, and electricity equals, a way of being able to alleviate poverty as well, and as part of the sustainability development goals. So we'll see that electricity consumption will rise significantly over the next, 20, 30 years, and will nearly double according to International Energy Agency estimates by 2050. And what this means is that there needs to be even more done on the generation side to ensure that we are generating green electricity. There's no point having electric cars if they're powered by fossil fuel, which is what Fredrika was also alluding to. And then on the topic of, I just want to make a point around hydrogen. Hydrogen on its own also, it doesn't really solve the problem. Firstly, it has to be green hydrogen. So we have to make hydrogen using green technology, green power. And then secondly, also the infrastructure deployment for hydrogen would also have to be developed and deployed, which in our opinion will take longer time. So while there will be a mix of different technologies to help go to sustainable transport, the easiest and I suppose the most foreseeable solution is to generate green electricity, and on the consumption side, adoption of electric vehicles through smarter charging infrastructure deployment.
Thank you so much, Nirupa. We have a question in the chat as well, and perhaps one of you sits with the crystal ball, because what are some of the exciting innovations in electric mobility that we should look out for in the next 5 to 10 years? So who knows, and who wants to answer that or reflect?
There are many that we are trying to keep track on and utilize as best we can. For example, the issue of transparency, where we need to make sure that we are having the right sustainability impact in our supply chains regarding human rights and then also environmental stewardship. And this is kind of the holy grail for sustainability professionals. How do you map up a supply chain and create transparency in a way that cannot be corrupted? And we've worked with certification schemes, chain of custody schemes for many years, but the corruption issue has always lingered there as the insecurity in that way of working. Enter blockchain, that revolutionizes this. Polestar 2 was the first car on the market where that had an announced use of blockchain to trace cobalt down to the raw material source. And it has worked really well. It has been a pilot project with all of the challenges in that, but we see such great results, and it makes us hope that blockchain can actually be used to tackle corruption and create transparency in supply chains.
Great. Thank you so much. Anyone else who wants to add about the future innovations? So let's move on to collaboration, because I believe working with Mobility X-Lab, we work with large corporations to partner with emerging companies and startups to find new innovations and solutions for future mobility that is sustainable and will create a better tomorrow. And I think that's interesting. I think partnership is the new leadership for all of us, and we need to be stronger together because no one will survive on their own. So I want to touch upon with all of you, what are you working on that could be valuable for others to share, and you have examples of how you accelerate together with others to create a sustainable future. So who wants to start off? I want to hear from all of you. So what is valuable that you're working on that you can share with others, or do you have examples of partnerships that where you work with other companies, organizations? Jan, you're nodding, so I'm directing the word to you first, please.
Okay. Well, as I said, we have a very big focus now on how to electrify the heavy-duty vehicles in Sweden. So we have some really interesting example how to transfer energy dynamical, both conductive and inductive solutions. And we also have a very close innovation partnership with both France and Germany to develop these kind of issues. So we have a number of real-life test facilities in Sweden on public roads that we absolutely can share knowledge about.
Thank you. Andrew, do you have examples? Partnerships?
Yeah, so 2 years ago we launched our pilot electric fleet with our partner and investor Hyundai. At the same time, we inked a partnership agreement with SP Power, which is the power transmission company here in Singapore, to deploy 200 charging points across the island. And that was what was necessary to even get this idea moving, because up till that point, the only charging points were effectively for government research only. So it was very difficult for the average ride-hailing driver to access those points to actually try to put a service together. That's in Singapore. In other parts of Southeast Asia, we have been working with the government and OEMs to roll out electric motorbikes. So scooter or two-stroke motorcycles, smaller motorcycles that are very popular here in Southeast Asia. And we've been running both delivery and passenger services using those electric motorbikes. So far, there has been plug-in charge. We have been in conversations about battery swap as a potential other model for which we can make this happen. And so it's really around playing as much as we can within the severe limitations that we have at this point in time, and just trying to figure out what works and rapidly innovating and failing fast and often and moving on, and again creating that feedback loop with our partners and with the government so that we can alter policies as well as make changes to manufacturing decisions earlier in the process rather than later.
Thank you. Nirupa, so collaboration, partnerships, learnings.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Katrina. I mean, such large scale, massive infrastructure deployments and, transitions won't happen without, cross stakeholder collaboration. And we have examples here in Singapore. Recently we announced a partnership with SemCorp and NTU for our first energy storage system in a virtual power plant application here in Singapore. So I say that as an example, although not directly related to e-mobility, but to highlight that it's taken an industry player like SemCorp, a technology provider like us, Hitachi ABB Power Grids, academia, to come together to develop and deploy technological solutions to prove them successfully, in real life conditions rather than a lab, to then help support to take it to the next level of wider scale deployments. And this also considers looking at not just the technology aspect, but the business model aspect as well. So I think that's where the next level of focus needs to come in, is on the commercial innovation, and how do you then use new innovative business models to implement higher uptake or support higher uptake of EVs.
Thank you. And Fredrika, you spoke about the example of life cycle assessment and the blockchain. Do you have anything else to share, what you're working with or collaborating with that can be of inspiration for others?
Well, one very important thing that I would like to raise is the viewing your supply chain in a different way going forward, not only having a customer and a supplier relationship, but actually seeing it as a partnership. And one example is how we worked with the interior materials in our car that we are gearing up to produce, Precept. Our commitment car that will challenge us on how sustainable we can make a vehicle. And in that, we really wanted to tap into renewable and innovative and circular materials. So we've teamed up with a Swiss company that has a material that is a composite consisting of flax fiber. I mean, they are also a small business trying to scale up. So we can really partner up to create the ability to scale up interesting new technologies, I think.
Great, very interesting. And I think if we can collaborate, knowledge share, and hopefully also create a bridge now between Sweden and Singapore more and learn from each other. I think it's been a great discussion here today, hearing about the different perspectives and how forward-leaning both countries are. It's unfortunately time to wrap up with the final question, and I want to direct the same question to all of you, because we've been speaking today about that we need to accelerate the implementation of sustainable electromobility. So I want to ask you, what is the first action that we need to do today to do that? And I want to first ask Nirupa.
Yeah, I think you can guess my answer by now. It's deployment of charging infrastructure. I think that's really, step one to help with the adoption of e-mobility.
Thank you so much. And over to Sweden and Jan, what do you say? What's the action we need to do today to accelerate?
Well, it's no question about it. It's the same answer that Nirupa just gave us. We need to deploy more static charging facilities in Sweden for passengers' cars, and also start deploying static fast charging system for heavy duty vehicles also, because we already have the techniques, we have the vehicles, so it's just to get started.
Thank you so much. And Andrew, over to Singapore. To accelerate the implementation of sustainable electromobility, what is the first action we need to do today?
Yeah, I think we've made so much progress, and there's still so much more that we need to do. So I think the unique problem in Singapore, to just add to what Nirupa and Jan have already added, is on top of charging infrastructure, the pricing disparity between an electric vehicle and an ICE vehicle is too big at this point in time. And it will take a combination of OEMs reducing that price, as well as government policies to try to bring those into closer to parity, so that it makes more sense for the average consumer. And so what that means is that you just need a lot of public-private partnership and discussions repeated over and over and over and over again. And recognizing that we all have the same common goal, which is to make our communities a fantastic place to live in. And that's what we want to do for our neighbors. That's what we want to do for our citizens. And so it's by enabling that sort of collaboration and innovation, right? More pilots will come out, more hiccups will come up, but ultimately we will end up with a better solution for everyone.
Thank you so much, Andrew. And the same question to you, Fredrika. What do we need to do today?
I think we need braver leadership today. So regardless if you work in government or in business, you really need to have the insightfulness enough, is that a word? I don't know, to really take on this transition in a much more braver way than what we are seeing today. We are seeing car companies and governments who are still investing in fossil fuel and internal combustion engine technologies. We really need to direct those resources to this electric mobility, not only because of what Andrew said, because we need to see better prices, but for a myriad of reasons. So braver leadership, realize that it's a race to the top. This is where the industry is going, and not joining in that, you will be lagging behind. So it's not only for the sake of good, but also for the sake of your country or of your business.
Thank you so much for these interesting reflections, thoughts, and discussions, and looking into the future a bit, and what actions we actually need today to create a sustainable future. It's key to knowledge share, to collaborate. Hopefully we're strengthening the bonds one step further between Singapore and Sweden here today, by sharing our perspectives and knowledge, and also connecting with each other. And before I turn the word to wrap up the session to Jody, I want to say that it's not about the large winning over the small, or the fast winning over the slow. It's about the smart winning over the dumb. So let's collaborate for a sustainable future together. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Katarina, for wrapping the panel discussion today very nicely, as well as for the fantastic moderation for our discussion on the future of electric mobility. It was very great to hear from the different perspectives on the roles of our different players in our ecosystem and how we can all work together for a more sustainable future. On behalf of SGInnovate, I would also like to give special mention to Andrew, Nirupa, Frederica, and Jan for joining us for today's session. I would also like to thank Dri and Ambassador Nicholas for opening our session, as well as to our event partner and close friends at the Embassy of Sweden in Singapore for making this event possible. We would also like to give thanks to our attendees for tuning in, and despite the time limit and the fact that we may not have answered all of the questions, I hope that the session gave valuable insights, and that you will also continue to support the rest of our events at SGInnovate. Without further ado, I'd like to just wish everyone a great day and evening ahead wherever you're tuning from, and I hope to see you again in the rest of our events. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.